Please welcome the fascinating presentation of Isa Gordon.
Hi. So the topic of my talk today is the age of distraction and the future of wearable tech.
So I guess we're gonna
Do I tell you? Next slide? Okay. So who I am and what I do is actually relevant to this year's talk. For any of you who have seen me talk over the last few years, you may know that I speak on subjects I just feel passionately about, not necessarily my own field of research. I have not talked about my own work in my own field of research since 2008, I think it was, when I did Gargoyle in My Pocket, the future of wearable tech. So it was a very similar talk. No, that was 2007. 2008 was reactive wear. So I did initially come to Bill and speak about my own stuff, but then I moved on and spoke about things that I cared about and used Bill as an opportunity to research things I was interested in and then share them with you all. But it does seem that the topics of wearable technology are becoming important again. Go ahead and give me next slide. So these are the things I am most known for in the world. There's a lot that I have done, but these are the things that have stuck. And I'm beginning to realize that they are quite relevant, and that's why we're going to bring it all back around, sort of the last 10 to 15 years of my work as a wearable tech researcher, cyborg performance artist, the founder and curator of the SIGGRAPH CyberFashion Show, and inventor of PodBelt. Since you may not have any context for these things, and pictures are worth 1,000 or more words, Psymbiote, cyborg performance persona. So she looks a lot like me. She is not actually me. She is a metaphor for my techno-lust. And you see here some of her evolution starting in about 2001 at the top left, and then going clockwise around 2002, 3, 4, and 5, or roughly something like that. I think 01, 01, 02, 03, 05, because, you know, that's how I go. So next slide. CyberFashion at SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH is a major art and technology convention that happens in LA very frequently, as well as other cities around the world. And the CyberFashion Show was something of an accident of miscommunication between myself and the chairman of one of the venues there. He said, "What do you want to bring?" I said, "I want to bring wearable computers." No one was using the term wearable tech back in 2001. But I had just embarked on the Psymbiote project and the Becoming Cyborg, and I said, I hear there are these things out there. I want to bring them to SIGGRAPH so people can get hands-on. Our venue at SIGGRAPH, the studio, was all about hands-on. Well, the chairman somehow heard fashion show, and he come back a few weeks later, "Oh, they love your idea of a cyber fashion show." Okay, maybe I did say that. Sure, I'll take that on. And then it became a monster that snowballed over the next several years. That's the second one there in the top right corner. Things were still a little rough, but we got a lot of interesting work. By the last show, it was a phenomenal, epic spectacle with some really amazing work from all around the world, really the most cutting edge of everything from the UK and from Japan. We have little kids' cyber fashions made from a group in Japan, and an entire journalist wearable computer. But this was still quite a number of years ago. This was 2005, these images on the bottom. Let's go ahead and get the next slide. Oh yeah, and the PodBelt. I've got one here as well. Perfect platform for your wearable devices. Next slide. All right. This is what it's really about. Can we get that first video playing? I wish I could tell you the name of this artist, but I do not speak Japanese. There is no text, so I may just... There's a little sound here going on. We've kind of got our sound a little bit. But I'm sure this looks familiar to everyone. This is what happens when you interact with the world like this. And all you do is this, which is about what you see everywhere these days, isn't it? A friend of mine was telling me about a photo series and didn't get back to me with the name of the photographer. but it sounded so fascinating. The photographer took photographs of people using their cell phones and then photoshopped out the cell phones. So all you see are the postures of how the people are interacting. So a couple are sitting in bed together, but they're not looking at each other. They're all kind of down and turned away, or they're at a table, but they're not with the person they're with. They're over here. But when you take the thing out of their hand, it makes for some very strange postures. So this is a problem, this way that we're currently interacting with the world. Okay, maybe it's not quite as extreme a problem as this, but there's a reason that they made texting and driving illegal. And it's not just when you're driving. There could be all sorts of things going on in your world that you're not connecting with. Hopefully you're not, in charge of large quantities of explosive matter. And we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to let you guys go find Life in a Bow. It's pretty good stuff. Share it with your friends, because we all know that feeling of being stuck in the screen, of wanting to experience the world out here, but needing the information down here. It really hits the point home to compare the first year that the Psymbiote emceed the CyberFashion Show, when at the very last minute, occurred to me, okay, not quite this last minute, but about the night before, I realized I have 5 pages of script to memorize of a lot of technical detail, and this is not going to happen by tomorrow. And I could not imagine hosting a cyber fashion show with a piece of paper in my hand. So this was 2002. There were no smartphones. I lucked out, and one of my colleagues among the very geeky people running the SIGGRAPH studio, one had a Palm PDA, which we all thought was pretty super cool. So that's what I have in my hand there, is a Palm PDA, but you can see what it does to my performance. Let's get the next slide. By comparison, from 2003 to 2005, we used a Charmit wearable computer with a micro-optical heads-up display, and we're going to talk a little bit more about both of those, but you can see how it completely changed my performance. And if that doesn't hit it home for you, we're going to play a couple clips of video from these different years. Go ahead and play the first movie clip A. So these are actually clips from the Psymbiote documentary, which you can find on the Psymbiote website, and I'll have that website up at the very end. So it's about an 8-minute documentary. This is just
hosted a series of wearable tech fashion shows. Version 1 was little more than a cool-looking costume and a PDA from which she read her script.
The first element we've been working on is the titanium.
I cringe every time I see this.
It's currently being fitted
This was the first year of it. I didn't even know that was what I was doing until very shortly before the show, so I cringe when I watch that. By comparison, it got a little better over the next few years. Let's play the next video clip. And it really had a lot to do with having that wearable system and having that camera in my eyeball.
As of the second SIGGRAPH show, she used a...
Oh, we just need to get the picture up there. Oh, there we go. There we go.
commercial wearable system that allowed her to seamlessly read her script while maintaining eye contact with her audience.
And all I have to do is select all and change the size of the font.
This is me trying to change the size of the font in the middle of the show.
It should be.
So every year that I had that wearable system, something went wrong with it. And if I ever come back and do these fashion shows again, if I ever resurrect Psymbiote, which I might, then I'm going to build such errors into the show, because they were always really the most interesting thing. I mean, probably I don't have to build it in, it will happen, right? There will always be some technology that goes wrong. But every time something went wrong, it highlighted the way in which those tools were facilitating me and how the loss of those tools were debilitating me. Let's go ahead and get back to the slideshow. You want to go to slide 12 if you can. Actually, let me see exactly where we are here. All right, so how do we do it? How do we keep connected to all that information that we need and be here now? How do we stay connected to each other and to the moment and not lose that 1 foot in the data stream, 1 foot with the information? Oh, no, that would not be it at all. We'll get there. We'll get there. I'm just trying to remember where I go next, and then I can just start talking. Oh, right. Thad Starner and Lizzie. So we'll get back there.
Which page is it? Right.
I think 12. And the title on the page is Thad Starner and Lizzie. Here we go. The Lizzie system headset was used as the basis for Google Glass. It was also the same technology that was used in the micro-optical headset that I read my script from in those 3 years of the fashion show. So basically, I was using Google Glass in 2003. And we're still waiting for it, right? I mean, Thad built these systems initially in the early 90s. He built the first Lizzie system at MIT. He coupled it with a piece of software he calls the Remembrance Agent and a Twiddler one-handed chording keyboard, so that every conversation he's having, he's capturing bits, but without ever breaking the eye contact with the people he's communicating with. But he's capturing bits, and then the Remembrance Agent is cross-referencing those bits with the entire database of every conversation he's ever had. So he suddenly is fed little hints about the person that he's talking to, or he's reminded of other conversations on the same topic so that he can introduce new pieces of information into the dialogue. When he went to defend his PhD, he wore Lizzie to his orals, which of course sparked a debate, I think he called it a firestorm, about whether or not that was fair and acceptable. And they determined pretty quickly, well, of course it's fair because he's been doing it for years and he will continue to do it. And the whole point is to evaluate the ability for the PhD candidate to get out there in the world and seem like an expert. And if he's going to be wearing that all the time, then it's perfectly valid. But apparently, the argument went from there to, well, perhaps we should put on the degree, Massachusetts Institute of Technology confers upon Thad Starner and his wearable computer the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. I don't think they did it that way, but apparently it was debated. So again, since the 90s, and yet, where are we now? Where are these peripherals? When I gave the Gargoyle in Your Pocket, the Future of Wearable Computing talk back in 2007, between when I did the cyber-fashion shows and that talk, the iPhone came out, changed everything. And I said at that time, it's now become clear that our wearable computers are no longer something we're going to have to take from a laptop and try to shove down into a smaller box. We've already got them. They're already here in our pocket. We just need some good peripherals. And here it is now, almost 10 years since I gave that talk, and I want to know, next slide, please. What happened to Google Glass? Why don't we all have them? So I did a little research because I wasn't quite certain what happened to Google Glass, and I should know this. And everyone I talked to was going, yeah, it just kind of came and went, and so I searched. I don't know if you can read this, but I want to highlight this little bit down here. As the Google spokesperson told us, the idea behind the Explorer program was always to see how people would use the technology. Now that Google has received quite a bit of feedback, good and bad, it decided to close the program in order to focus on further versions of Glass. So basically what they seem to be saying is, we just wanted to get out there, see what happens, now we're going to work on it some more. Next slide. It's very possible, though, that this more had to do with the reasons. Google Glass banned. This is just the Google search on Google Glass banned. And top 10 places that have banned Google Glasses. Google Glass ban signs. It's official. Google Glass banned in movie theaters. So I think Google wanted to see how people would use this device, and what they discovered was people just wanted to use it to do terrible things, to break privacy laws, piracy laws, to steal other people's data or steal other people's privacy. Peeping Toms, stuff like that. That was not really what they were hoping for, so I think that they wanted to reevaluate the kind of message that the device itself was putting out there, or the things that they could do to keep it from being associated with unseemly sorts of behaviors. Next slide. I also wanted to talk about just a couple of other ideas about Google Glasses was really about putting a little tiny floating screen here. I did it in the 2003 fashion show, the second year of the show. We got 4 or 5 different wearable systems, and I tried all of them before settling on the Charmit and the micro-optical headset. And it was that headset. It was very different from any of the others. All of the others either blocked one eye, so yeah, you had a nice big screen there, but you lost your binocular vision completely. And you had this sort of sense of unbalance with the world. There was one, I believe it was called the Nomad, that had a fairly large transparent display. So that was kind of cool, but it was this sort of bright red, like old style, the old style green monitor type? It had that feel, but red, and overlaid on the world. It was very painful, really, to try to read it for any length of time. The Thad Starner-based micro-optical Google Glass to be floated right here. You could look around it. It was just big enough to get enough text at a time to see what was going on. Not really more than that. Like, you couldn't really watch a movie on it so much. And I never got to actually try the actual Google Glasses, so I don't know how much it differs from the original micro-optical. But it's a very small screen, but the point was you could look around it, and you could still maintain your binocular vision. You could kind of look a little this way to look away from the screen or into the screen. Steve Mann had a very interesting, slightly different way of doing this all. He called it the eye-tap system. He said, if you want to get data into the human brain, the most convenient way is to tap through the eyes. So what he's got going here in most of his systems are a pair of cameras properly spaced to duplicate his binocular vision, and then a pair of screens against his eyes. But everything is being mediated through the computer. So it's image input through the computer with an overlay and then output in front of his eyes. I love that this shows the sort of evolution and weight of it. Go ahead and give me the next slide. But I really liked this comparison of where he started with. This was one of his older headsets. I think that was the Wear Comp 2. And this is one of his newest there on the far side. And next slide. I love this. Back when I started doing this research into wearable technology, before that term had been coined, back in around 2000, I went through my massive collection of old techie magazines, which included Popular Mechanics, Wired, Omni, if you remember that one, Discover magazine, and some National Geographics, I think, and I pulled out all the stuff that seemed related. So yeah, December 1998. Why don't we all have these? This, also from 1998 or 1999, that was a student project that was actually intended as a system for the hearing impaired. yeah, I can't remember now if it was for the sight impaired or the hearing impaired. Visual voice must be for the hearing impaired. Next slide. So a couple years later, that was about what we had going here. So you can see how like slim and convenient the 2002 wearable computers were. And this sort of atrocious keyboard mounted to the leg, these sort of giant things mounted to the face. But very quickly, things were starting to get slimmer, and then the iPhone came out, and all wearable computing research products, they just evaporated over the next few years. And here we are, 10 years later, still waiting for peripherals that make things more useful. Go ahead and give us the next slide. Of course, there are still even other options. Do we even need a screen? How can we stay connected to our devices without having a screen? Well, Kevin Warwick from the University of Reading in the UK is a cybernetics researcher who was implanting wearables under the skin that were actually functional. Again, this was, I think, about 2001. I got to meet Kevin in 2002. His first experiment had been just a passive transponder. So they just put a little chip inside him, and they created technology, ubiquitous computing, all over his office that just listened for his passive transponder to walk by. So he would walk in, and the computer would say, "Good morning, Dr. Warwick." And the lights would turn on, and he would go towards the door, and the door would open for him. So it always knew where he was. He later put a second system connected into his nerves, and he said that when someone's cell phone would receive a message, even though it was in completely silent mode, he would still feel it. His nerves would still light up from this incoming call. Next slide. I think we're about done. There are some other options. Audio input. This is Greg Priest-Dorman's system from about 2001. Keyboard in one hand, audio in your ear, and it would just read him his email and allow him to type email without having to have any screen. Next slide. Of course, we could make it a little slicker and sexier as well. Next slide. Tactile feedback. This is a shirt full of little buzzers in it, and she liked to call it the massage shirt. Next slide. But this same kind of technology has very practical applications. This is a motorcycle navigation vest. It's just a concept prototype, but what an amazing concept. Why, driving a motorcycle, would you want to look down here to see where you have to go? And instead, it tells you, go this way, go this way. Next slide. Of course, smartwatches, terrible idea. Next slide. Fitness trackers, very limited interest, very limited demographic. So what is the answer? Well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be going to get my PhD to figure it out. But that is the next step on my journey. So come talk to me in a year and say, did you get into that PhD program? When do you start? But these are big questions, and no one is doing it right. So I've decided to go back to academia, to pick up the reins as wearable tech researcher, possibly to revive my cyborg performance persona, and to make something a little bit more functional for communicating and knowing what's going on with these things other than this. Because you see how that just changes everything in our relationship? So I'm tired of that. Let's get our eyes here, be here now, and I think we're done. Can we get the last slide? So find out more about my project, symbiote.org, podbelt.com, and feel free to keep in touch with me at my Facebook page, /Isa Gordon, or LinkedIn, /Isa Gordon. Thank you, guys.